All right, this is the last frame that I put on my stage. So now I'm building where I can open the mouth. And so I have to build additional puppet assets for my character so its mouth can open. And I usually build it backwards. But I'm just going to start by opening the mouth this way. And I need to delete it from my base layer here. So there is no mouth there. So then I can put this underneath it, this kind of pink that fills in where the mouth is. And then I can put the jaw underneath that, right? Now a simple way to build the inside of the mouth here, because I can trim it a little bit better. But remember, animations aren't super detailed. So it's okay if it's just a little bit wonky here. I'm not going to reveal teeth or anything. It's already got a beak. It's meant to look kind of goofy. But what I can do is I can take this layer and I can do things like dodge and burn it. So make it a lot darker near the inside of the mouth and a little bit brighter. Make it a lot darker right at the tip. So there's like kind of a cast shadow. I can even fill it with a gradation. I can do all kinds of things. I can use clone stamp. Here, first I'll mask around it with my select tool. Then I'll use clone stamp, and I can do it at a low opacity and bring some of this interesting feather texture onto the inside of the mouth. Almost looks like baleen, some of the bluer stuff at the back. Right? And now just really burn it at the edges. And then where I want a tongue to kind of show, I can dodge it. And then if I want it to really make sense, I might build up. This is why we can make pixels here. I might just build up with a brush. I have my tablet, but I don't even need it. And I can kind of paint in the edge of the mouth on the layer in front. Just make it clear. And then for what's inside the mouth, I can kind of paint on that and paint its edges. And darken it back here. Yeah, let's take my opacity down on my brush a little bit and go to black. There we go. And then kind of show this tongue as separate than the rest of the opening of the mouth. And the rest of this is on the jaw itself. And then on the tongue, let's take the opacity down on my brush and I'll make that little seam on the tongue. There we go. Cover up that little highlight. Okay, so now we have our character with an open mouth. Let's see, where's that point coming from? It's coming from here, so I'm just going to trim that a little bit. Okay, now I have to figure out this asset, right? So if I do Command 0, get them all set. So it goes from this to this. And that actually looks like a pretty believable amount of movement. So I'm okay with that. I'm looking what the water's doing, where the foot's going, and the mist clears a little bit. So good. So I'm ready for my next frame. So I hold down Option, say Layer, Merge Visible, Command A, Command C, paste it in on top. So now I'm at the end of my first 3 frames for my storyboard. So this is a good time to run what I call an animation test. So I save my stage. And I save my assets. But before I save it, I'm going to deselect and delete that merged frame. Okay, now on my stage, you should only run animation tests on your stage. You're going to have just a mess otherwise. We go to Window and we click on Timeline. This is just to see how things are working. I'm going to shrink it on a little bit. Okay, now on Timeline, you're going to get an option for frame animation. You click on that, and then it will set up like this, because we're doing frame by frame animation. We're not doing a video timeline. That would be for video editing. Then I'm going to click on the window options of Timeline, which are always in the upper right-hand corner of the window. And I'm going to say Make Frames from Layers. This is why we make our stage so simple. It's just like turning the movie projector on. And what it is every layer that's in our stage becomes an animation frame in the video projector, including the background, which is just blank white, right? And if I don't want that, and I don't, I can double click it so it renames, that unlocks it, and then I can just delete. But then I have to delete that animation frame as well by moving it to the trash. So now I have 8 layers. Well, that's interesting. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, because I erased some. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers, 8 animation frames. Now, what's different is these timeline previews, they simply program the eyeball next to the layer. We're using it in its most basic form for frame-by-frame animation. And so I can just see how the water changes. But it's hard to look at the water and look at where I'm clicking. So underneath each of the timeline frames, it also gives you a timing for how long do you want your viewer to see that frame. And you can set it to any fraction of a second or full seconds. I am going to set the same timing for all of them. And because my creature is slow, I'm going to do a timing of other and 0.4 seconds. So that's just a little bit slower than 3 frames per second. Usually I'll do 0.3 as a nice default, but I'm going to go even a little bit slower for this scene. And then you can see how that animation works. And this is a test, so you see, is that movement enough? Do I need more frames to show my character movement? Or am I going too slowly and I need to move it along? And I say this is about the sweet spot. Like the water looks believable, the mist looks believable, my creature is moving believably. Even though it's this kind of choppy animatic. Smooth animation requires 24 frames per second minimum, and that's full production. We're just doing a GIF. Okay. So the trick now is once you've done your animation test, you want to select all of your frames in your timeline again. Do not hit delete or it will delete your layers. And then you drag them to the trash within your timeline. And then go to Window and turn off your timeline tool. And hit Command 0 so it's layered up again. And now I'm ready to make my next frame. Now my next frame is a big one. And I want to do it in maybe about 2 or 3 steps where he gets his whole mouth around this tree. And his head is just going to open incredibly big. So for that, I need to play with these 3 assets, right? And keep messing with them. So to do that, I'm going to select all three and then duplicate them and then put them in their own folder. I'm just going to call it mouth open. And I'm going to turn off the others. First thing, I want to move the body. And so let's use, let's see, puppet warp first on the big body without a lower jaw. So edit puppet warp. And because I made edits to it, by erasing the jaw, it's not going to remember where I put the pins. And I'm going to move the head forward. Actually, if you right-click, you can delete pins. So I'm going to move the whole head forward like that. Move the chest forward. And move the hips forward. Here. He's going to kind of lean on his foot a little bit. So that's a big change. Don't worry about the jaw yet. And I want to see if that's kind of the amount of change I want from there to there. Looks a little weird on the leg, but makes sense. I think maybe I want to arch the back a little less. So I'm going to say image or edit puppet warp. And pull that a little bit more extreme and then pull this up and this down. So it's a little bit thicker. There we go. Because I got to make room for that mouth, right? Now I can put that jaw in. So the lower jaw, where do I want it? Whoops. And I accidentally drew things on the lower jaw I wanted to draw on the upper jaw, but I can warp this. I'm just going to do regular free transform, Command T and warp, so that it looks like it drops lower. Kind of stretches out. Cartoonish. One of my favorite things about Looney Tunes is how they'll animate these kind of motions, like when a cat puts like a whole pie in its mouth or something. It just kind of unhinges the jaw. And I can soften along this back edge. Okay, and then the inside of the mouth. With that tongue, right? So basically this is just the tongue now. So I'm going to cut that tongue out. And I might even label it tongue, so I can play with that. And now I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to call this mouth. I'm going to move it behind. And now I'm going to stretch that with warp to make it fill in the rest of the mouth. There's all kinds of ways you can do this, but this is one way. So all those texture variations. Make it shaped like this. Aha. Okay, now I'm going to burn and darken that.